In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through a workflow that you can set up that will allow you to use OpenAI and Airtable automations to generate hero titles, hero descriptions, SEO titles, and meta descriptions for your landing pages. It's going to be a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey friends, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So it has been a sweet minute since I've made a really juicy no-code tutorial, and today we're going to return to the roots of setting up no-code tutorials specifically for the Unicorn Factory, which nowadays I barely do, but this is hopefully going to illustrate a few use cases for no-code tools and AI that will really speed up the process for doing some pretty fun things when it comes to optimizing your landing pages. Now, I've got plans to evolve this workflow into something bigger, so I'm breaking it at this stage down into 3 main stages. So first of all, I want to do the on-page essentials, which is to use AI to automatically generate hero title, hero description, SEO title, and meta description for my landing pages that I generate. Then I will potentially in a future video create the paid ads workflow, which is going to be to create things like site link text description lines and for my Google ads, and then also to create things like Facebook ad text and Facebook ad titles for these particular landing pages. And then I might also create a final workflow that is part of this, and so I'm going to chain them all together, which generates a custom thumbnail or a Facebook ad image. So this is going to be an asset part. Now, I've done this in various ways in the past, and I even have a video on how to do things like create custom thumbnails. But the point that I want to illustrate with this is that all of this is going to be sitting in one big workflow, and I'm going to be taking you through each step. It's going to be reasonably advanced, so if you are brand new to setting up workflows, this is something that you'll probably have to follow along with and ask questions and those types of things. But with all of that being said, we've got a lot to do, so let's just dive straight into the first part. Okay, so with all workflows, the first thing that we're going to have to do is to define our trigger. Now, nowadays, I pretty much trigger most, if not all of my workflows from inside of Airtable, only because it gives me a lot more flexibility with the triggers that they have. But then what I typically do is just run a script that then fires a workflow inside of Make or whatever it is. But I'll be talking you through that as we start setting it up. But for now, the first thing that we're going to need to do is to define our trigger. Now, for this particular workflow, what I find the easiest is to actually just create a checkbox that we're going to call optimize, that we can use to basically trigger the workflow. And so what we're going to say is whenever we click this button, run the workflow, once it's done, just remove it and we'll be good to go. And that way we can just restart it every single time we want. Okay, so that's number one. I'm just going to move this up front. So let's go into Airtable automations and define our trigger. So we're going to go in here. We're going to say when a record matches condition, we're going to go ahead and select our table, which is the skills table. And we're simply going to say when the optimize field is checked, then run the workflow. So if we go ahead and we choose it, there's nothing in here right now because nothing's checked. But if we go back, we'll check the copywriting one. What we'll do now is we'll choose it again. You can see that it's available. Okay, so we have our trigger defined. The next step will be to run our first workflow. And in our first workflow, what we're going to do is make an OpenAI call to generate our SEO title, meta description, page title, and page description. Okay, now I'm going to save us all some time and just use the script in question that I generated with the wonderful help of ChatGPT. So you can create these types of scripts with ChatGPT, which really makes these tools so amazing. It's such a huge time saver. Now, I'm going to talk you through the different steps so you know how to modify it all, especially if you are new to scripting. And if you are new to scripting and this seems a little bit overwhelming, don't be. It's honestly a matter of copying and pasting and just understanding how all of the different pieces work together. Okay, let's dive into the first part. So what we're doing is we are retrieving a record from Airtable that is checked. So in this case, it's my copywriting landing page. And what we're doing is we are sending a message to OpenAI to basically tell it that we need it to generate an SEO title, description, all that kind of stuff. And the way that we do that is we first of all define our API key for OpenAI and our endpoint. Now, what do those two things mean? Your API key is essentially your password for OpenAI that allows you to basically contact OpenAI and verify that you are the actual rightful owner of the account. So you just get the OpenAI API key from their website. You can sign up and retrieve this API key and you just paste it in here. It starts with SK dash and then you just paste it in there. So you don't need anything like Bearer or anything like that in front of it. Next, we need to define our endpoint. Now, the endpoint that I'm using is the chat completions endpoint. And basically, it's the code version of ChatGDP. So if you are brand new to like coding concepts like this, just think of it as in like me typing a message into ChatGDP and getting a response. Now, whenever you send a message to their API or a request to their API, you need to specify some things. And so what we're going to need to specify are things like the message, which includes the system message and also the user message. And then also there are a few specific things that you need to specify, like the model that you want to use and the actual message. Now, all of this information can actually be retrieved from their website in their API documentation. I'm not going to dive into it in too much detail just because we've got a lot of different things to cover, but just know that that is how this code is generated. They give you instructions on their website on how to set this up. Okay, so now that we know how to send the message to ChatGDP, essentially, now what we want to do is we need to generate variables that allow us to change out the different pages that we want to optimize for. And the way that we're going to do that is by retrieving that information from Airtable. Now, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use what's called the input.config function. And this is a function that you can use inside of Airtable scripts that basically allows you to pull in information from a specific record inside of Airtable. And so we are going to always be choosing the record that triggers the workflow in the first place. So the way that you can do that is by just defining a variable, and we'll call it let service, but you can also call it let landing page, whatever it is that you want. And then we're going to go equals input.config. And now what this will allow you to do is to add a bunch of variables from your Airtable record. And so what we're going to need is the name of the actual service. And so in this case, I'm going to be using the field that contains the actual name of the service, so in this case, copywriting. And then you might also want to define other ones. So you might want to define one for job title, in which case you can just go in here, you can add it as job title. And then you can just simply map the field that contains your job title inside of Airtable to this field. And now, whenever we use the variable service name or job title, it will always reference whatever is in our Airtable record. Okay, so that is that part. We now have defined what it is that the record that we want to pull in and the variables that we might want to use when we are sending a request to OpenAI. Next, what we need to do is define our message. Now, our message is essentially what you would type into ChatGDP. So if you've used it before, you'll know there's like a little message bar. That is essentially what you type in. Now, the system role is basically the predefined rules that you give ChatGDP. And so I'm going to keep it nice and short. I just wrote, you are a skilled SEO copywriter for Unicorn Factory, a freelancer marketplace that helps New Zealand business owners find and hire local freelancers, tasked with creating SEO title, meta description, page title, page description, and so on. Look, I'm not a huge prompt writer. If you are looking for a prompt writer, just go and have a look on Twitter. There are like 1 million of them selling their guides. Now, what we can do when we are writing our message is we can actually specify variables that we are pulling from our Airtable record. And so what I want to do is I want it to generate an SEO title, meta description, page title, and page description for the record that triggered the workflow in the first place. And so what we're doing here is we're saying, use the variable service name that we defined up here. So when I select a different record later, so let's say, for example, logo design, it will use logo design in this field here. And so that way you can constantly customize it. And so this is how you add variables in there. Okay, so I use it twice. I say the content should be optimized for the following key phrase: hire, freelance. In this case, it would be logo designer. So I could even add the job title variable in here, which I've defined as job title. So let's go and use that in here. There we go. So it's defining this variable. And then I also have some additional little things that I had to optimize for. For example, only return your recommendations in JSON format, nothing else. So sometimes ChatGPT likes to have a little chat with you. By adding this last line, I basically say, look, I don't want your spiel. I just want you to return my SEO title, meta description, page title, and page description in JSON format. And the reason why I want that is because we're going to need it in that format in order to save it later on. Now, this next part here allows us to make the actual API call to OpenAI. Now, what it does is it pulls in all of the different variables that you've defined along the way. So your OpenAI key, your OpenAI URL. So where is it? Your OpenAI URL gets used here, your body, all those types of things. And so this again is what you can find in the API documentation. And then this part of the code, we are making the actual API call. And so what we're doing is we're using our body that we've defined here along with our variables. And we are also using our OpenAI URL, which we have defined up here as the endpoint for chat completions. And then as soon as it runs, what we want to do is we want to get the response from OpenAI, and we want to save it as a variable called data. Okay. And so once we have this saved as data, what we want to do is we will get it as a text block essentially. And what we want to do is we want to pass the content that we receive in JSON format. Okay. And so that is what we do in the next step. So we get the return from OpenAI as text, but it will be text in JSON format essentially. And then what we say is, take the content of the response and pass the JSON. And so that will basically break it into little JSON objects that we can then use later on. Now, again, it sounds technical. It will all become very clear in just a moment. Then what we do is we add some console logs. So the console logs essentially allow you to print what response you get, and it's very useful if you want to see where certain things are going wrong. And then finally, the final step is we want to save and reuse some of this information. And so the way that you can do that is by using the output.set function, which basically takes the response and saves it as a variable that you can then later on use in your Airtable automation to do whatever else that you want. So in our case, it's going to be to update our Airtable record with these fields in question. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do is add our OpenAI key, and then what we're going to do is we're going to run it. Okie dokie, so let's test it. I've just added my API key, and typically this will take a little bit of time. If you use ChatGPT 3.5, it typically goes a little bit faster, but hopefully this just works on the first attempt. And when I say first attempt, I tried it before on a different collection and it worked. So hopefully this is all positive. So we're just gonna wait. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And here we go. And so it all worked. So let's have a look at the response that we got. So first of all, we got our script input. So it actually tells us what the variables were that we passed through. Then it gives us our script output. So what are the variables that we saved? And so you can see here we're saving our SEO title, meta description, page title, and page description. Now we're also saving the actual response. And so this is what we can see here. This is the response that we got from OpenAI. So we've got our SEO title, our meta description, our page title, and our page description. And now we've taken this text block and we've converted it into JSON that we can now store as individual variables. And so that is what we do here. So now we've got our SEO title, meta description, page title, and page description, and we can now use these variables in future automation steps. And that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so what we want to do is we now want to take our output and we want to update our record, our service record, with the information that was just generated by OpenAI. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our table, which is the skills table. Then we're going to select the Airtable record ID. Now the Airtable record ID is the Airtable record ID of the record that triggered the workflow in the first place. So it's this record up here. When we click the button, we're clicking the button on a record, and that record has a record ID, and that is the record ID that we have to use. And so in here, what we're going to do is we're just going to select that record ID, and now we can decide what fields we want to update. So I want to update the SEO title field. I want to update the meta description field. I want to update the page title field, which I don't have. I think I called it hero title. Yep. And then we also want to call this one here hero description. Now, what we can do is we can now use our output.set variables and map those responses to these fields here. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to where it says run a script, and it's now going to give us all these fields that it generated for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick SEO title, map it in there. Next, we're going to select our meta description, put it in there. Then we're going to select our hero title, and we're going to put the page title in here. And then finally, we're going to use the page description, and we're going to put it in here. Fantastic. Now, one last thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to uncheck our optimize button. So the way that you do that is you just select your optimize button, and then you just leave it blank. Okay. So now if we generate a preview, what exactly will happen? We will see that our hero title gets updated, our SEO title gets updated, our meta description gets updated, and we should also have our hero paragraph somewhere. Where is it? Meta description, SEO title. Will be somewhere. Okay, so now that we know that it works, what we're going to do is we are going to turn this on. We're now going to head back to our data view. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to remove these fields here so that we can test this. And I'm actually going to change the job title here to content editors. And now what we're going to do is we're going to test this workflow by ticking it. Now, again, keep in mind, because the API calls take a moment, that it might just take a little bit of time in order for this to update. But if we just wait a moment, we should see our hero title field, hero description field, SEO title field, and SEO or meta description field populate. So we're just going to wait. Exciting times. Says it ran successfully. Perfect. So now it's populated. So you can now jump in here and you'll now see how it's automatically generated our SEO title, our meta description, hero title, and hero description, and it unchecked the optimize button. So let's go through and basically update these things, because now we have basically created our workflow that allows us to automatically generate these things. And we can now also set up a workflow to basically say, hey, whenever any of these fields update Webflow as well. I might make a video about this in a future video. I do have a few videos on my channel that show you how you can trigger workflows inside of make.com using Airtable automation. So that is probably how we're going to do it. But for now, let's just wait and see how they all update. And there we go. It all looks good. Now, the good thing about it as well is you can actually, if you want to change some of it to like manually, you are able to do so. Just go and drop that in here. And so it basically generates it for you, and you can then make whatever adjustments that you want. Okay. And so that is the first part of the workflow done. It automatically generates our hero title, hero description, SEO title, and meta description. I'm going to leave the code on my website. So if you want to copy and paste this over, feel free to do so. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Smash the like and subscribe button. The more likes I get, the faster I'm going to make the next video. So I'll see you back in the next video. Bye.